Hi guys, when Nigel Farage says jump, mainstream politicians reply with, how high? So it seems the Labour government now wants to copy Denmark. Why? Well, because they seem to have a tough approach to immigrants and asylum seekers. And because Nigel Farage is leading in the polls, Labour want to catch up with him by doing something similar. But as I'm going to point out, there are a few problems with that.
So why Denmark?
Well, when I came into Parliament, one of my big commitments to my constituents is that we would tackle the small boats and deal with those gangs bringing people right across the world to the UK. And so this was a big priority. So I started looking at what was happening elsewhere. And Denmark, they are also a democratic socialist country. They came to power in about 2017 with exactly the same issues, with the far right biting at the heels, and that was the conflict. They had to deal with the illegal immigration crisis in order to be able to get on with the job. And they have come back. If you look at the current data, they've got the lowest rate of asylum applications in 40 years, and the number of returns for people who have failed their application process is at 95%. And so there are lessons that we can learn, and I very much welcome that Shabana Mahmood has asked her team to go out and have a look. And I'm hoping
sorry to interrupt. What sort of policies then are successful in Denmark that you think should be adopted here?
So one of the things that they're requiring applicants to do is actually contribute to the cost of their claim. And I think that if a refugee is successful, they should be required to work in this country, and they should be required to contribute. And that includes recovering the cost of the claim, processing their claim. And I think it could be done like a student loan. The other thing I think is important is that, and it's already happening with the Syrians who are here, there's an expectation that they should return once the crisis or the terror that is caused them to cross continents has completed and the country that they came from is safe. I think they should go back and help rebuild their own nation state. They will have skills, they have experience, and they will also have family where they came from. And I think it's important.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting idea, isn't it? But what happens if someone comes over here, they settle here, they're working here, they get a job, they do well in that, they maybe even start a family here? You're then saying that they have to return when things are better in their own country, despite them really making roots here?
I think if when they are granted refugee status, it's very clear that this is a temporary thing, and there's an expectation that they will have to return. So they will live their lives with that knowledge that they're here on a temporary basis, and they should go back. They should rebuild, be part of that rebuilding once their country they have come from is safe to do so.
Okay. So there are a few problems with this. First of all, she said that before we get to Denmark, she said what they need to do is they need to contribute. They need to pay back the cost of the processing of the asylum claim. Okay, but part of the cost is so high is because there's a massive backlog. So is it the fault of the asylum seeker, the individual asylum seekers, that the backlog is so long? And that's why it's so expensive, in part? I don't know if it's very fair asking somebody to pick up the tab when the problem is not theirs. And the other problem is that if you're going to suggest that people have to return, well, what happens to those bills? Like you said, they have to take out something like a student loan. So what if they don't pay off their loan before they're deported or sent back to their home country? This idea that, well, people are in the country temporarily and then they have to go back. Well, then what happens to their family? If their children were born in the country, do they have to go as well? Are you going to separate families? This is okay maybe with an individual. Maybe there's a justification for sending them back. But if they have a family, and remember, when it comes to processing claims, it can take many years to process a claim. And people don't just sit in limbo. They try and get on with their lives. They maybe try and get a job, or they start a family or something like that. So it's not as simple and clear-cut as, well, you have to pay back and we're expecting you to return to the home country the country you came from, as soon as the situation improves. Remember, just because the situation improves does not automatically mean that it would be safe for that individual to go back. Anyway, but the main point, of course, is Denmark. Why are you trying to copy Denmark? It doesn't make any sense to me. Denmark is a member of the European Union. Now, it has opted out of certain requirements within the European Union when it comes to asylum seekers and refugees. But it's still cooperating with the rest of the European Union in other areas of the asylum process, or within asylum itself. So the UK can't, because the UK is not a member of the European Union anymore. So you can't really copy that aspect. So, and remember, Denmark, while it is imposing strict restrictions and measures on asylum seekers, it is a member of the European Union. That's one problem. Another problem is the location. Denmark is in Europe, on the continent, while the UK is an island. So, of course, the only way for people to get to the UK, if they don't have a safe route, is by a small boat. There aren't many small boats coming into Denmark because there's no need for a small boat. So you're comparing apples and oranges here. And then finally, the numbers are completely different. The latest data I could find was 2023, and there were 4,200 asylum claims in Denmark. 4,200. There were over 60,000 in the UK. So once again, you're comparing completely different situations. Just acting tough may have worked in some way for Denmark, but the other issue, of course, is it's in Europe, so it's able to take advantage of a situation where you can send refugees or asylum seekers back to other countries in Europe as part of the Dublin Agreement. As far as I know, Denmark has signed up. If it's not, then maybe it has some other agreement with countries in Europe. But it's a member of the European Union, and it's not an island. So, not like the United Kingdom, at least. There are islands, of course, but it's not like the United Kingdom. So, you're comparing a situation that's completely different. And, of course, the most important one is the numbers are not anywhere near each other. So while you may look at Denmark and say, yeah, they acted tough, we should act tough as well, we know the proper solution to this problem. You create safe routes for people to get to the UK. Then you would stop the boats. Because there's no justification, there's no reason for them to pay people smugglers. That's how you truly smash the gangs. And it takes the issue of the small boats off the table, truly in a way that Nigel Farage, Reform and the Conservatives can't weaponise anymore. They would move on to something else, but at least they wouldn't be able to weaponise the small boats. And that should be a massive win politically, but also in a humanitarian sense as well. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think, and I'll see you in the next video.